Hi, my name is Ika, and this is my first proper video on this channel. And today I would like to show you how I made a simple Rubik's Cube with Java that you can visualize with a panel. In this video, I will explain to you the process of the project as well as what I learned and what could be improved. So you may think, what's Rubik's Cube? As you may know, a Rubik's Cube is a 3D puzzle shaped into a cube whose sides are painted in six colors, which are white, yellow, red, orange, green, and blue. These sides are divided into 3 times 3 table, whose elements you can move horizontally or vertically. In this project, my aim was to make a cube which you could move by adding commands into a computer, like up or down, and the result turned into something like this. I'm going to show you how the project went. If you have checked my other videos, you'll see that I usually bring up the concept of the project, which is a way to visualize how I'm going to structure my code to achieve what I want to make. In this case, the way you can see the Rubik's Cube is rather simple. So a cube is just a list of tables whose elements change accordingly to what you do. So in other words, we're aiming to get a list of matrices or arrays which contain the color of each of the little squares of our Rubik's Cube. So how did I make the project? My project had two phases. So first of all, since I wanted to incorporate graphics but I had zero experience with libraries in Java, which I still have to experiment with, I first made a console visualizer, and I'm gonna explain to you with detail how I made this. Phase 1. First things first, I started making a class called Rubik's Cube, on which I started making all the methods to make our cube. First of all, I made an array initializer method that would set a little cube. And as a reference, I made the cube so that the front side is white and the side on top is the green one. I also made a printing method that will allow me to see the cube on the console, and this is actually very useful for debugging in the future. It's usually done in projects. And as you can see, the cube, I made it so that it had this structure. Now, onto the methods that change the panel placement in the cube. You see, this is rather mechanical, but it will follow the same structure always. You know that no matter what row or column you want to move, there's going to be a bit that will always going to move. For example, if you move towards the top, which means if you move a column up, you know that in the center, which means the front side of the cube, the white in our case, it's gonna change into a different color, in this case blue, and then the one on top, and then the one on the back, and then the one on down will also change. This is always going to change. However, if you move the column that's most to the left or most to the right, the side is going to change no more than 90 degrees. So if you manage to find the method that manages to move all the little squares, turn them, rotate them 90 degrees, you can actually simplify the code much more. And this I actually learned way later in the project. And this is going to be very useful and can be recycled when you do your other methods. So if you get the right coordinates when you code the moving method, you have the pretty much the hardest part of the project done. And on top of that, I also made an additional method which allowed you to change the orientation of the cube. So if you didn't want to see the white part anymore, the white side, you always change it to the upper part or to the right side. And since the cube is symmetric, if you want to move to the left, all you have to do is apply the method 3 times. So if I wanted to move to the right, I can move to the left 3 times, or vice versa, and also up or down. Assembling all these together, I pretty much wrote down the main method, and we obtained our little cube. But since I thought it was kind of boring like this, I decided to make it graphic, and this is where we start phase 2. As I told you before, I barely knew about the graphic libraries in Java, so for this part, I just recurred to a live session I had at uni and also searched a little bit through the internet. And I set up everything. I made a new class called GUI panel and implemented methods like creating a frame, printing the lines of the cube, setting the colors, etc. And since I didn't realize before that I hadn't done instance variable for the Rubik's Cube class, I made a new one, R cube, and referenced it. The code worked, so that was pretty great. I then made a few changes and made an example method in the Rubik's Cube class so that you could actually check whether the movements were right or wrong, and it actually worked. So finally, we incorporated more changes of in the code so that the user could implement the moves that he wanted. This is the final result. After a few tests, this is what I managed to make. This was my first graphic project, and overall, I had a lot of fun with it. However, I made some mistakes that, while they may not seem to be too big, they could have been catastrophic if I've done them in bigger projects. And after all, this is all about learning, so I find these important to change for the future. So first of all, pore space complexity. While I think I did better than other projects with the time complexity, I ended up using data structures that occupy way more than they should. So instead of using a string array for the cube, I should have used something like a char array or an integer array, which would have allowed the code to occupy much less memory. Two, the backside wasn't processing properly. And I realized this too late because while I was doing some tests, I realized that the backside was inverted. So I realized later that actually you don't really have to invert the side so that the cube worked. Three, the code doesn't change live. If I had implemented something like JButton, any other library, I think the cube would have updated in real time because that's sort of the image that I had in mind when I was making the project. But still, I'm pretty happy with what I made. Overall, I would rate this like a 7 out of 10 for a project that I thought for myself. So yeah, that was pretty good. Well, this is all for today's video, and I hope you liked it, and see you soon.